At around 14:25 local time, the trench line looks quiet. No visible assault, no movement across open ground. Then the sound arrives first, a low, rising buzz. Brief, close. Russian infantry are already inside their trenches when the pressure begins. There is no warning shot, no clear front line to face. The threat comes from above, and the next seconds decide everything. For a long time, trenches meant safety. They stopped small arms fire. They absorbed fragments. They gave soldiers a place to breathe and regroup. But that assumption no longer holds. FPV drones are not drifting overhead at random. They appear in short cycles, strike, disappear, then return again. Even when nothing explodes, the pressure does not lift. Soldiers cannot tell if the next dive is seconds away or minutes out. Staying still feels dangerous. Moving feels worse. So the trench becomes something else, not cover, a decision trap. What happens when the place meant to protect you forces impossible choices? These FPV drones are no longer acting as harassment tools. They function as an active strike layer. They pressure infantry, timing, and discipline at the same time. Corners of trenches, shallow dugouts, temporary shelters where blast pressure has nowhere to go. Footage released by Ukrainian UAV units suggests these strikes are carefully timed, not during heavy movement, but during repair. Rotation. Short pauses meant for recovery, but that wasn't the real problem. The real damage builds quietly. Repeated hits weaken trench walls. Sections collapse. The line loses its shape. Fatigue sets in faster under constant threat. Communication becomes cautious. Small mistakes appear at the worst moments. This matters now because the goal is not a dramatic collapse. It is attrition. Pressure that slowly makes holding ground feel more dangerous than leaving it. And once that feeling sets in, survival is no longer the hardest part. The real test is how the defense tries to recover. The pressure doesn't arrive once, it returns. FPV drones come in short cycles. They strike, they pull away, then they circle back again, not to push infantry out, but to keep them exactly where they are. Russian soldiers remain pinned because every movement feels visible. Every pause feels dangerous, and the next seconds still decide everything. Staying inside the trench carries one risk. Leaving it carries another. There are no good options left. When soldiers stay in place, repeated blasts begin to eat away at the trench itself. Dirt walls weaken. Wooden supports fail. Sections collapse inward. The trench still exists on the map, but its shape changes. Its protection fades. Over time, what once felt solid becomes unreliable. Trying to move doesn't solve the problem. The moment someone shifts position, FPV drones react. Movement stands out from above, especially when operators are already watching for signs of displacement. So defense turns into exposure. How long can soldiers hold ground when rest is impossible? Even when no explosion lands, the sound matters. The constant buzz overhead keeps everyone tense. Tasks slow down, mistakes increase. Fatigue builds faster than normal. Discipline slips in small ways. Communication becomes cautious. This is not breakthrough warfare. There is no dramatic rush forward. This is attrition. Pressure designed to wear down attention, coordination, and confidence. Pressure that makes holding ground feel heavier with every hour. But then the situation tightens even more. Because the worst moment isn't during chaos, it's during routine. When units try to repair damaged sections, when tired soldiers rotate, when order is supposed to return, that's when FPV pressure peaks. Routine defense suddenly becomes crisis. and the structure that held everything together starts to strain. And it's exactly at that fragile moment, when order tries to return, that the next phase begins. The shift happens quietly, not with an assault, but with movement. FPV drones don't always force soldiers out of cover directly. They wait. They hover just long enough to signal danger. And when someone finally moves, that's the trigger. Position no longer matters as much as motion. A trench can exist. A dugout can remain intact. But the moment a soldier climbs, runs, or shifts along the line, detection becomes almost immediate. The next seconds decide everything. Movement stands out from above, especially when operators are already searching for signs of displacement. So defense changes shape, not because it is destroyed, but because it begins to thin. Small withdrawals happen first. One section empties faster than another. A short pullback here, a hesitant pause there. No breakthrough, no dramatic collapse, yet gaps begin to appear. Why do empty trenches matter more than destroyed ones? Because a defensive line works as a system. When one position goes quiet, nearby units must stretch to cover it. That raises stress. It increases mistakes, and it breaks coordination without firing another shot. These gaps don't look dangerous at first, but they weaken the line's ability to hold together. Each abandoned section pulls pressure onto the next. The effect spreads beyond the front edge. Supply runs slow down. Short rotations are delayed. Medical movement becomes risky. Paths that were safe minutes earlier turn into watch zones. Even small adjustments require timing and caution. Everything behind the trench begins to move slower. This is why timing matters more than firepower. FPV pressure doesn't need constant explosions. It only needs to appear at the wrong moment. When soldiers try to reposition, when units try to reorganize, when the line attempts to settle, reaction creates exposure. Exposure invites another strike, and the pressure widens. What began as infantry disruption starts to affect the entire defensive structure. Confidence fades, decisions shorten, movement becomes hesitant. At that point, holding ground depends less on numbers and more on whether support arrives in time. And as infantry pressure spreads, commanders reach for the one thing meant to restore control: armor. Armor moves forward because something has to. When infantry starts to struggle inside damaged trenches, commanders look for stability, a visible anchor, something solid enough to calm the line. So tanks and infantry fighting vehicles are pushed closer. At first, it feels logical. Engines arrive. Armor parks near the trenches. Crews prepare to support soldiers below. But from above, that movement changes everything. Tanks and IFVs stand out clearly to FPV drones. They are larger, hotter, slower near the line. The moment a vehicle pauses, it becomes part of the same kill zone as the trench it is meant to protect, and the next seconds decide everything. FPV drones don't always aim to destroy these vehicles outright. That isn't necessary. Instead, they target function, tracks, engines, turret components, side sections where armor is thinner. A single hit can be enough. Mobility slows, smoke appears. A vehicle stops doing what it was sent to do, and behavior changes instantly. Crews hesitate to stay close. Short withdrawals replace steady presence. Engagement times shrink. Infantry notices right away. The sound of engines fades. A damaged vehicle becomes an obstacle instead of protection, and confidence drops. What happens when support becomes a liability? The pressure cycle tightens. Infantry pressure pulls armor forward. FPV drones target that armor. Once vehicles pull back or are disabled, infantry loses its anchor. Then, the pressure returns to the trenches. This doesn't rely on one decisive strike. It relies on repetition. Each disruption reinforces the next. Armor crews learn that staying still invites attack. Infantry learns that calling for support doesn't guarantee safety. Coordination shortens. Communication becomes cautious. Everything operates in smaller, risk-averse bursts. Even when a vehicle isn't destroyed, the effect spreads. A slowed response here, a delayed move there. Over time, combined action weakens. Tanks are no longer just counters to infantry fire. They become high-value signals. The moment they appear, attention follows. And the battlefield logic shifts again. Because targeting armor alone isn't the breakthrough. The real shift comes from how everything is connected. It no longer feels like separate attacks, because it isn't. Reconnaissance, UAVs and FPV drones begin to operate as one layer. One watches, another waits, a third moves in. Live images flow while the fight is still unfolding. Movement along the trench line, vehicles approaching from the rear. Small shifts that would once have gone unnoticed. Decision time collapses. There is no pause to recover, no window to reset positions. The next seconds decide everything. When infantry reacts to pressure inside the trenches, FPV drones are already adjusting. They don't wait for perfect targets. They wait for reactions. A drone hovers just long enough to signal danger. Soldiers move, and that movement becomes the cue. At the same time, other UAVs track armored vehicles trying to stabilize the situation. Speed, direction, moments when a vehicle slows or pauses. FPV drones are guided toward whichever layer becomes exposed first. This is where the system begins to break. Infantry is forced out of cover before armor can settle in. Armor is threatened before it can provide steady support. Neither is allowed to operate at its own pace. Can traditional command chains keep up with that kind of pressure? Orders shorten. Pauses grow longer. Coordination relies more on instinct than planning. This is not about destruction. It's about disruption. FPV drones don't need to destroy every target. They only need to arrive at the wrong moment. Each response triggers a counter while the previous action is still in motion. The line doesn't collapse in one dramatic instant. It loses rhythm, step by step. Infantry hesitates to move without armor nearby.